Okay, so today we're diving headfirst into Aristotle
We are.
with his Nicomachean Ethics, no less.
Yeah?
Which, I'll be honest, when I hear ethics, when I hear ancient philosophy, I immediately think, okay, I'm about to get lectured at.
It's true. It's true. It can be a little dense.
But thankfully, we have you to help us kind of break down some of this stuff and hopefully find some, surprisingly practical things in here.
Yeah, well, hopefully we can make Aristotle relevant
Yes.
to a 21st century audience
Exactly.
and for their,
Everyday lives.
everyday anxieties and
Yes.
issues and all that.
So no pressure, but you're saying that Aristotle can help us navigate our 21st century existential crises.
I think so, yeah. I mean, he starts from this very basic idea that every action that we take is because we think that it's good. Oh,
in some way.
all right.
So whether that's you gonna get another cup of coffee or, scrolling on your phone for 3 hours or finally starting that book you've been meaning to write, it's because on some level you think it's good.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah.
So how do I decide between, I don't know, finally cleaning out my sock drawer or, booking a flight for a trip I've been wanting to take? Because
Yeah.
they both feel good in very different ways.
So Aristotle says that there's a hierarchy of good.
Yeah, okay.
So there are things that are kind of like fleetingly good, they feel good in the moment.
Right.
But then there's the ultimate good,
Yeah.
right? Which he calls eudaimonia.
Eudaimonia, which sounds a lot like a Greek yogurt, but go on.
It's often translated as happiness.
But it's a little bit more profound than that. It's not just about feeling good in the moment. It's
Yeah.
about, flourishing as a human being,
Okay.
living a good life. Some people translate it as human flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's much more about, living a life, the best life that you can possibly live.
So all those self-help gurus that are live your best life
Yeah.
are actually just ripping off Aristotle.
Basically, yeah.
Amazing.
And he thinks this is all a matter of living virtuously.
Okay, so virtue, and we're not talking about following the rules,
Mhm.
right? Because I feel like,
Yeah.
the world's a little more complicated than that.
Exactly. He was not about, rigid rule following.
Okay.
He was much more interested in this idea of the golden mean,
Okay.
which is basically about finding, the sweet spot
Between two extremes.
between two extremes.
Give me an example.
So, courage.
Okay.
Courage, for Aristotle, is not about being, some sort of daredevil
Right.
who takes unnecessary risks.
Right.
It's about finding, the balance between being, recklessly courageous and being, a coward.
So it's that perfect ratio
Yeah.
of brave, but also not reckless?
Yeah, and it's going to be different for everybody.
Right, of course.
He calls it the mean relative to us.
Okay.
So, a generous, if you think about, generosity, a generous action
Okay.
for someone who has very few resources is going to look very different
Yes.
than a generous action from somebody who's, Bill Gates.
Right.
Right. So it's all about, understanding, your own situation and
Context.
context, exactly.
Love it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm already thinking back to every time I've been should I stay or should I go or
Mhm.
should I eat this or not?
Yeah.
It's so interesting to think about it in terms of what's the virtuous thing?
Mhm.
What's the virtuous path here?
Yeah, and he thinks that this is an active process. This
Okay.
is not something that
It's a choice.
it's a choice. Yeah, you have to constantly be thinking about it.
Okay, so already we're getting into some really good stuff.
Yeah.
Thinking about virtue and how that ties into this idea of happiness and flourishing
Yeah.
and living your best life.
Yeah, I mean that's really what it's all about, right? It's how do we live a good life? How do we flourish?
Right. And how do we make good choices that lead to that?
Exactly.
We can't talk about this without talking about justice.
Yeah.
Because Aristotle dedicated a whole book to it, so
Yes.
it's obviously a big deal in his philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So break it down for us.
So he talks about two different types of justice. There's universal justice,
Okay.
and then there's particular justice.
Okay, so universal justice
So universal justice
is the big picture.
Yeah, it's basically what we've been talking about, being virtuous.
Okay.
In general.
Gotcha.
And then particular justice is more about kind of how we treat other people
Okay.
in our specific dealings with them.
So particular justice is making sure we're treating people equitably.
Yes, equitably. So this is a little bit different than just following the rules. Right. So he actually has this term, equity, which he says is like, but it's a little bit better than just.
Give me an example because I feel like this is important.
Okay, so let's say that you have a friend and they are, you know, maybe going through a tough time financially.
Yeah.
And you have the means to help them.
Okay.
You know, you might think like, okay, as a good friend, I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to be there for them, maybe give them some advice. But like actually helping them financially might be a little bit above and beyond.
Right.
But Aristotle would say like, no, that's actually the equitable thing to do.
Okay.
In that situation.
Interesting.
Because you're in a position to help.
So it's like, it's that internal debate of like, what's fair and then like, what's truly the just thing.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So it's about understanding the nuances of the situation and really using your judgment.
So we've covered happiness, virtue. We even touched on justice a little bit.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's more to this good life thing. Like it can't just be about being a good person, right?
Yeah, that's right. He wasn't just interested in like building good character. He was also really interested in people using their minds.
Okay, so it's not enough to just be good. We got to be smart too.
You gotta be smart.
Okay, I like this. Tell me more.
So he called these intellectual virtues.
Yep.
And he had like 5 main ones that he talked about.
5. Okay, don't worry. No pop quiz, but hit me with it. What's the first one?
Okay, so imagine you're like, you know, watching a documentary about the cosmos and you're just like fascinated by like black holes and the Big Bang.
Okay, yeah.
And you know, you're probably not going to like build a spaceship tomorrow based on what you learned from this documentary.
Right.
But you're just fascinated by it.
Right.
So that kind of like thirst for knowledge, that's what he calls Sophia.
Sophia. So like wanting to learn just for the joy of it?
Yes, theoretical wisdom.
Okay, love it.
Okay, now let's say you're the kind of person who just really wants to know how things work. You love reading articles about like, you know, how the brain works or how like the latest gadget works.
I know some people like that.
Yeah, so that desire to know like how things work, the nuts and bolts of things, that's episteme.
Okay, so Sophia's more like the big questions and episteme is like, how do we figure out the answers to those questions?
Yes, exactly.
Love it.
Okay, and then have you ever had like an aha moment when you're trying to solve like a crossword puzzle or something and suddenly like it just clicks?
Yes.
That's no,
okay. That light bulb moment when you're just like, I got it.
Exactly. Okay. And then there's technique. So this is like the art of making and doing.
Okay.
So think about like a really good carpenter, you know, somebody who can make a table that's both beautiful and functional. Okay.
Or a musician who can just like, you know, play the most beautiful music.
So technail is about taking that knowledge, that Sophia, that episteme, and actually making something out of it.
Yeah, turning it into something real.
Very cool.
Okay, and then last but not least, there's phronesis.
Okay, I'm ready.
This is a big one.
Okay.
This is practical wisdom.
Okay.
So this is like your internal compass that helps you make good decisions in everyday life.
So it's like when to speak up, when to be quiet,
exactly.
When to, like, you know, double down, when to fold.
Yes. When to eat the cookie, when not to eat the cookie.
That's a big one. It's like that little voice, maybe don't have that 4th slice of pizza.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's about, like, making sound judgments.
Right.
Thinking about the different options.
Weighing things out.
And then making a choice based on, like, what's going to lead to a good life.
Exactly.
I feel like this is a lot, right? Like, This is a lot of different things, but how do they all fit together?
Well, that's the thing, is that he doesn't think that these are, like, totally separate things.
Okay.
He thinks that they all work together.
Give me an example, because I'm trying to picture this.
Okay, so let's say you're really concerned about, I don't know, climate change.
Okay.
So you might read all of the scientific reports, right? You're using your episteme.
Right.
And you might be, like, really moved and, like, kind of awestruck by, like, the complexity of the problem, right? Your Sophia.
Right.
But then your phronesis, your practical wisdom, is going to be what, like, you know, makes you decide to volunteer for, like, a local environmental group or something.
So it's not just about having the knowledge, it's about actually doing something with it.
Exactly. He thinks that all of these things have to work together.
Gotcha.
In order for us to really live that flourishing life.
The eudaimonia life.
The eudaimonia life.
Okay, I'm with it.
So we need both, like the good character and we need the like intellectual development in order to really
to put it all into practice.
Yeah.
I like that. And, you know, we've talked about how important it is to make good choices, to be virtuous, to use our brains. But what about those times, and we've all been there, when we know better, but we just don't do better.
Yeah.
Like, what about those moments when, I don't know, like our emotions kind of take over?
Yeah, he was really interested in that too.
Okay.
He called that akrasia.
Akrasia.
Yeah, weakness of will.
Okay, so akrasia, is that like, what is that? Like the mythical beast that tempts you to eat the cookies when you're trying to eat healthy?
Basically.
Okay.
That's a great way to put it.
Because we all have that.
We all do. We all do.
So why do we do that? Why do we fall victim to that?
Well, I mean, he had a couple of ideas.
Yeah.
One is just like, sometimes we have the knowledge, but we're not using it.
Okay, so it's not enough to just have it in our back pocket. We got to, like, actually use it.
Yeah, we have to, like, actively be like, okay,
Right.
what have I learned? What am I supposed to be doing?
Right, and that's the hard part.
It is.
Sometimes those emotions, like you said, they just kind of take over.
Yeah, sometimes we're just overwhelmed and
Yeah.
we can't even think straight.
Like you get in a fight with someone, you say something you don't mean, and it's like your anger just took the wheel
Exactly.
and drove right over your brain.
Exactly. You're not thinking clearly.
Yeah.
And then sometimes our desires just like straight up lie to us.
Okay, yeah.
They make us think that something is good when it's
Yeah.
really not.
Like that extra glass of wine at dinner.
Exactly.
Or, one more episode before bed.
Exactly.
So what do we do? Are we doomed to just be, like, controlled by our emotions and our desires?
Well, he doesn't think so. I mean, he thinks this is just part of being human,
Okay.
but he thinks that we can get better at it by, practicing our virtues and practicing, like, self-control.
So, like, building up those, resist the cookie muscles, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Love that.
But if we can get in the habit of thinking about it,
Right.
then it becomes a little bit easier.
So it's a journey.
It is.
It's not like we're not going to figure it out today, but
right, but it's something to work towards.
something to work towards.
Mhm.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Well, this has been incredible.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, who knew that Aristotle was, like, the OG self-help guru?
That's right.
So, as we kind of wrap up here, what's, like, the main thing that you want our listeners to take away from this deep dive on Aristotle?
I think just the idea that, like, living a good life is a process, It's not like you reach some point and you're like, okay, I'm good now.
Yeah.
It's about constantly learning and growing.
And making those choices, those virtuous choices.
Exactly.
Even when it's hard, even when the cookies are calling your name.
Even when the cookies are calling your name.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for this.
Yeah, it was my pleasure.
It has been incredibly insightful.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, thank you, as always, for joining us for this deep dive. And we hope you found it interesting and helpful. And we will be back next time with more deep dives on whatever we decide to explore next.